Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness unto light, lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good morning and namaste everybody. So, yesterday we applied the method of Drig Drishya Viveka, the discernment of the seer from the seen. Viveka, the word itself means, it's been translated as separation, discrimination. I prefer the word discernment. So nowadays discrimination is not a politically correct word. We have been told to discriminate and say it is a negative, it's a loaded term. So discernment is actually even more accurate. Two things are there, mixed up, and we need to see them clearly for what they are. Sri Ramakrishna said, sand and sugar are mixed up. The ant can separate them. Water and milk are mixed up. The swan is supposed to be able to separate them. And the third one, of course, for which what he said, there is no English translation. So you can translate it to Hindi. He said in Bengali, চিনিতে বালিতে মিশে আছে পিঁপড়ে আলাদা করতে পারে, দুধে জলে মিশে আছে হাঁস আলাদা করতে পারে, গোলমালে মাল আছে, গোলটি বাদ দিয়ে মালটি লাও। गोलमाल में माल है, गोल को छोड़ दो और माल ले लो. So this is the golmal, which we are in the middle, this samsara. But Brahman, Atman, God, whatever you call it, is right here. So what you need is this viveka, this ability to separate them. Separate them in our understanding, separate them in our experience, not physically separate, you can't. Just like you will separate wood and the table. The table here, when we say touch wood, you're touching the table, but we know it is wood. How are you doing it? You're separating the wood in your understanding from the name and form of the table. Similarly, in this experience which we are having, which experience? Any experience. Brahman, Atman, pure consciousness, Sakshi, whatever you call it, is continuously there. But we need to be able to separate it in our understanding. So these are methods of separation, discernment, these Drig Drishya Viveka, Panchakosha Viveka, Avasthatraya Viveka. These are all methods of discernment. All of them will lead to the same result. Finding out that I am the witness consciousness, Sakshi. All of them. So yesterday we saw Rupam Drishyam Lochanam Drik Tad Drishyam Driktu Manasam Drishyabhirittaya Sakshi Drigeva Natu Drishyate. We start with the most naive way. Here is the world, and the eyes are seeing the world. But I am aware, so the eyes are separate from the world, what they are seeing. And these eyes, opening, closing, I can see well, I cannot see well. Andhya, mandhya, patutveshu, we read yesterday. I understand. I can objectify the eyes. I can know the various conditions of the eyes by the mind. So the mind is the seer and the eyes become the seen. Mind is the knower, eyes become the known. Mind becomes the subject, eyes become the object. The mind itself in its own turn becomes the object because I am aware of the contents of my mind. Thoughts, feelings, ideas, memories, desires, all are there in the mind. But then they are object to the Sakshi, witness of the mind. Witness is the seer and the mind is the seen. What about the eyes? Seen. What about the word? Seen. Word is Drishya, body is Drishya, senses are Drishya, mind and its contents are Drishya. My whole so-called personality is Drishya. And the Sarvapriyananda personality. I have often mentioned the root of the word personality lies in persona, which is a Greek word for mask. Mask. So, when you say personality development program, it's mask development program. You are not the personality, it's the mask which we wear. And this Drig Drishya Viveka shows us how it is the mask that we wear. Because it is an object. We are aware of it. If you are aware of it, it's an object. It is Drishya. You cannot be it. Then what are you? You are that which is aware of everything. I am that constant light we saw yesterday. Navriddhim yati nakshayam. Naudeti nastameti. This one consciousness which is like a sun which neither rises nor sets, continuously aware, illumining everything. And we saw yesterday in the analysis, in all our sensory experiences, I am is constantly shining. It is there, it is shining. Existence, awareness. In all our mental thoughts and feelings, it is there, it is shining. I am. In all our activities, whatever work we are doing with the body, whatever action we are doing in the physical world, it is there, it is shining. In all our waking, all our dreams, all our deep sleep, it is there, it is shining. I am. You may not be able to verbalize it. You may not even notice it. You may not even do this kind of exercise. But it's constantly there. What is the proof? Because you are having experiences. Every experience is the proof that you are consciousness. This so far we have seen. Now today, we will take a closer look, more precise look. How is it, alright, I am awareness, but how is it that I am so intimate with the body? Why is it that I think of myself as body-mind? What is the mechanism? Why does the body feel like I am this one? Why does the body feel like that? This is consciousness. It is conscious. I feel conscious. Why? How? Also, I would like to know, what is this waking? What is dreaming? What is deep sleep? These seem to be conscious experience to me. Also, I would like to know, what is birth? What is death? What is the Vedantic explanation of all of these things? What is life itself? In that case, if I am just consciousness shining, then what are all these things? We will take a close look and very precise look at where we are going wrong, how we are connected to this body mind, and from this how we can trace back to our real nature. We'll take a precise look at that first. Then we'll explain what is waking, dreaming, deep sleep. We'll explain what is life and death, Punarjanma, all of these things, ideas which you have got in Vedanta. Everything we'll explain from this perspective. That is the syllabus for this morning class. So for this we'll have to introduce the interesting concept of reflected consciousness or shadow consciousness. Verse number 6. Chichaya veshato buddhau Chichaya veshato buddhau Bhanam dhistu dvidha sthita Bhanam dhistu dvidha sthita Ekaham kritiranya syat Ekaham kritiranya syat Antakarana rupini Antakarana rupini. Buddhi appears to possess luminosity on account of the reflection of consciousness in it. Intelligence or buddhi is of two kinds. One is designated egoity, ahankriti, the other as mind, antakarana. Okay, let's unpack this. The concept is this. See, we experience the body, we not only experience the sense organs, we not only experience the mind, but we also experience consciousness. All of us feel conscious. When people are talking about consciousness, Vedanta talks about consciousness, we nod, yes, consciousness is also there. Body is there, mind is there, consciousness is also there. Yes, I feel conscious. Sometimes I feel more conscious, less conscious, and consciousness seems to be changing, increasing, decreasing, many things are happening. And that's what is the field of study of consciousness studies. But this consciousness which we are experiencing now, which in fact we are using for all our transactions, all our experiences, this is what Vedanta calls reflected consciousness. It is not the Sakshi. It is not the Sakshi. What is the relationship between this reflected consciousness and Sakshi? Very much like the reflection of sunlight. Sunlight and moonlight. At night, the earth is illuminated by moonlight. And we know this moonlight, it functions just like sunlight. In fact, in a sense, it is sunlight. It's reflected from the moon. But there are certain differences. This moonlight is not the original sunlight. It is reflected from the surface of the moon. Not only that, sunlight is constant and ever blazing forth. But the moonlight changes depending on the reflecting surface. Sometimes new moon, sometimes full moon, sometimes half moon, phases of the moon, all of these are there. Now we are not in sunlight. So these are all due to the moon itself, which is the reflecting surface. I remember as kids, we used to play like a prank. So with strong sunlight in daytime, we used to have in school tiffin time, lunchtime, so go out and play and have tiffin and all that. And I remember the tiffin boxes used to be like metal, tin boxes, and we could flash the sunlight on somebody's eyes. It used to be naughty. Now that reflected sunlight, it acts just like sunlight. It can be blinding in a flash, but it's reflected based on that metal, on that tin. Just like that, the idea is the mind, because of its extreme fineness, sattva guna, has the capacity of reflecting, quote unquote, channelizing, utilizing, whatever you call it, consciousness. Just like the sun is falling everywhere and reflecting, but there are some surfaces like water in which not only sunlight is reflected but a little image of the sun is formed. So similarly, in all the material things in this universe, one kind of special kind of material thing is antakarana, the inner instrument. Here it is called buddhi. And that the speciality of it is, it can form an image, it can reflect consciousness, it can, I won't say capture, channelize, let us say, consciousness. This consciousness which is channelized or reflected in the antakarana, in the buddhi, call it mind, antakarana. Antakarana simply means inner instrument. Inner instrument. Is there outer instrument? Yes. Instrument of what? Knowledge. The outer instruments of knowledge are eyes, ears, nose, skin, tongue. Why? Because they are in contact with the outside world. They gather information from the outside world and present it to us. But internally we also have an instrument which takes the information from the five senses, processes it, stores data, takes decisions, has judgments about it. This whole inner instrument is called antakarana. Our common sense, our ordinary language, we call it mind. Mind. We all have minds. So this mind shines with reflected consciousness. We don't know how or why only the mind does this, but the mind can do that. Just like the moon reflects sunlight without at all being luminous. The moon is not a luminous body, but it reflects sunlight and works like a luminous body. Just like that tiffin box, it's not a luminous body, but it reflects sunlight. Similarly, the mind has no consciousness of its own. It's an object. Dhivrittaya sakshi, it is illumined by consciousness. But these dhivrittis also shine in consciousness. They are so close to consciousness, close in nature to consciousness, that they seem to be consciousness. They seem to reflect or shine in borrowed consciousness, in borrowed light. As we go along, this will become more clear. And just like the sun can illumine things, the moon also can illumine things. Though it has no light of its own, it can utilize the sunlight to illumine. Similarly, just like consciousness illumines the dhivrittis, the mind, the movements of the mind, they also seem to illumine the senses, and through the senses, the world. The mind seems to consciously know the world. Now we can see. Chit-chaya veshato buddho. Instead of chidabhasa means reflected consciousness. Abhasa means not real, appearance. Appearance of consciousness, not real consciousness. Always locate it in your own experience, very vital, otherwise it will all become theory. Chidabhasa is the consciousness which we are all feeling now. Just touch, cold touch, light. These are all conscious experiences. This is, according to Vedanta, is all being mediated by reflected consciousness. So here, that reflected consciousness, the term usually used is chidabhasa. In this book, it is said chit chaya, shadow of consciousness. Chit chaya avishato buddho bhanam. In the buddhi. What is the buddhi here? Just a general term for the inner instrument, antakarana, or general term for the mind. In English, what we call mind. This shines, bhanam, it shines now. This mind itself shines, it feels conscious. If you look inside, thoughts are there, but they feel conscious, very full of awareness. Especially at the beginning of the class, we're all full of awareness. So the mind is fresh, it shines. Now, he is going to make a division, a classification. First of all, let me tell you the usual classification in Vedanta, and then the special classification which the author here is making. The usual classification of the Antakarana, inner instrument, is fourfold. Mana Buddhi Chitta Ahankara. Mana Buddhi Chitta Ahankara. Each has specific definition. For these definitions, you have to go to Vedanta Sara. Each has specific definition based on its function. And today in the morning we are chanting Mano Buddhi Ahankara Chittani Naham. Why? Why am I not mind? You all automatically identify with the mind. But Shankaracharya is singing, I am not the mind, I am not the memory, I am not the intellect. Yeah, yes, I am the ego which possesses mind, memory, my mind, my intellect, my memory. No, I am not even the ego. Ahankara Naham. See, Manobuddhi Ahankara Chittani Naham. But these are four components of the mind, of the Antakarana. Mana is called, little confusingly, mind. So mind has a specific function that is called manas. So in the inner instrument has four components: mind, intellect, memory, ego. Mind is mana or manas, intellect is buddhi, and memory is chitta, and ego is ahankara. This is the usual classification. What do they do? What do they do? They are all precise definitions. The mind is a processing instrument. Data which comes, it says sankalpa vikalpa atmakam antakarana vritti manaha. That function of the inner instrument which processes data, sankalpa vikalpa, is it like this, is it like that? It's working. Then when the result is presented, correct or wrong, whatever it is, result is presented, nischayatmika antakarana vritti buddhi. The intellect is that which comes to knowledge, which comes to it's called the determinative function of the inner instrument. Nischayatmika antakarana vritti. That movement of the antakarana which gives knowledge. It is like this. Is the class at 8 o'clock or 8:30? 8 o'clock or 8:30, that's mind. When it comes to decision, 8:30. That is buddhi. All knowledge is buddhi. Sometimes it's wrong, it can be revised later also. Then the data upon which we do all our activities or judgments, purva samskara, the past records, data, storage, is called chitta. It's confusing because in Yoga Sutra, chitta means the whole mind. The whole mind is called chitta. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. But here chitta specifically means memory. And finally, there is one more function, ahankara. Abhimanatmika antakarana vritti ahankara. Ego, definition of ego. What is the definition of ego? The appropriating function of the inner instrument. Appropriating function means that which owns everything. It integrates everything in the body mind. That's why we feel like one person. The ego says, I am thinking, I am sitting, I am talking. Thinking, sitting, talking are not functions of the ego. Sitting is function of the body. Talking is function of the vocal cords and the vocal mechanism. Thinking is function of the mind, manas. But all of them, they are integrated and owned by one function called ego. This is what the ego does, see. When we say I, we mean I am this, all of this it owns. It is a necessary function for functioning in the world as one unit, as one person. So there is ego. This is the usual division of the antakarana. Usual. Everywhere you find. Shankaracharya, we are singing every day in the morning, you see, fourfold division. Mana buddhi chitta ahankara. But here, now that you know the usual division, you will appreciate the difference he has made. Here he is organizing in a different way. The whole thing, inner instrument, he calls it buddhi. And that takes the light from consciousness. Now this buddhi, he says, divide it into two parts. You forget the mana buddhi chitta ahankara. Just divide it into two parts. Isolate the ego from everything else. Ahankara. One part is ego, I. The rest you call inner instrument. The rest you call antakarana. And repeat, the new classification which we will use, and there's a reason why he's doing this classification. Very precise. His approach is now going to be remarkable forensic investigation into who am I. Exactly like that. You see, I already know who I am. Yes, but why am I like this now? This body, mind mixed up in all of this. And how do I, you're saying that this consciousness is Chidabhasa, then from this Chidabhasa, how do I go to my real consciousness? How do I discern, understand my real consciousness? All of this will be revealed. That's why he is arranging in such a way. What is the arrangement? Just concentrate on yourself, I, ego. And the rest of the mind you put it under one basket, call it Antakarana. We will not be concerned with that. We are concerned with I, the ego. So this much. Why is he doing this? Why is he doing this? He will, see, he is saying that, the author is saying that, see, right now, what is in our experience? In the state of ignorance, we will keep saying that pure consciousness, Sakshi, it all seems like theory. Sometimes we seem to understand it, sometimes not. But we will never deny that we have bodies, we have minds. So he says, let us just take up what is available in our experience and then I will show you what you really are. First take up what you think you are. Nobody will deny this. And in that, the last thing, the final thing which we have got is the ego. The subtlest thing which you are closest to the self in the state of ignorance. Closest to the self is what? Ego. That's what most people think as the self. I. Alright, let us make a laser sharp focus on I, ego. And the claim is that I is not the real I. We are going to go from the ego, ahankara, to the I am, that Sakshi which we were talking about yesterday. We are going to go in a very, very clear way. Then you will know the path to trace from our available experience to what Vedanta wants to show us. So, ego. So what's the last thing? Last means most subtle thing, final thing we have got which nobody will doubt. Ego shining in reflected consciousness. This chit chaya shining on the ego. See in your own experience, I, and notice it's a conscious I. You just look into yourself, I. And how will you trace the I? I am sitting, I am listening, I am trying to understand that I. And that I is shining in consciousness. And that consciousness, Vedanta is calling reflected consciousness. Okay. That much. We are ready now. Rocket is ready for takeoff, blast off. Now, next step. Concentrate on ego shining in consciousness. Chaya hankarayoraikyam Chaya hankarayoraikyam Taptaya pindavanmatam Taptaya pindavanmatam Tadahankaratadhatmya Tadahankaratadhatmya Dehaschetanatamagaat Dehaschetanatamagaat. In the opinion of the wise, the identity of the reflection of consciousness and ego is like the identity of the fire and the heated iron ball. The body, having been identified with the ego, which already has identified itself with the reflection of consciousness, passes for a conscious entity. All sounds very complicated, but actually very simple and very elegant and beautiful. What is he saying here? Focus on I, shining in reflected consciousness. And he's giving an example here. Example is of red hot iron ball. This tapta-pinda, ayapinda. That means, imagine a blast furnace in some factory, iron works, and a metal ball, iron ball is there that has just been put in the blast furnace. It comes out. What will it look like? It will be red hot. It will be glowing red and very hot and also round and heavy. And they are two what together? What are the two? Fire and iron ball. If you look at the red hot iron ball, there are two entities there, fire and the iron ball. And both properties are mixed up together. Some properties from the heat, from the fire, and some properties from the iron ball. It looks red, it is shining red. Is iron ball normally red? No. Is it normally shining and glowing? No. That glowing red color is coming from fire, from the heat. But it is round. Is fire round? No. That round is coming from the iron ball. But it is hot. Is the iron ball hot? Not at all. That heat is coming from the fire. But it is heavy. Is fire heavy? No. It is iron ball which is heavy. So you have a composite entity displaying properties of both as one. Similarly, right now if you look at the I, the ego is a function of the mind. And mind is very closely connected with the body. In Vedanta, Sankhya, mind, body, they are all matter. They are all jada. Why would you say they are jada? Remember the definition of jada. Anything that appears to consciousness is jada. So does the body appear to consciousness? Yes. Does the mind appear to consciousness? Yes. Jada. Mind and body are closely connected. Ego is very closely connected to mind and body because ego is a function of the mind. Ego is function of the mind. Ahankara. But reflected consciousness comes from pure consciousness. So this composite entity, ego, which is function of the mind-body, mind connected to body, and consciousness, reflected consciousness, together, awareness, where does it come from? Reflected consciousness. But I am this person. Where does it come from? Ego, mind. I am Sarvapriyananda. Where is it coming from? Not from consciousness, from mind, from ego. This jadatva, it's an object, I can feel it. That I can feel it comes from the ego. It is conscious, comes from reflected consciousness. Like this, it is a composite entity. Which one? The one which I am feeling now, I. Because this I is closely connected to the mind, it is a function of the mind. Ahankara is a function of the mind. Chitta vritti vishesha. Therefore, when the ahankara shines in reflected consciousness, it also is borrowed by the mind, which is around surrounding the ahankara. When the mind is illumined by consciousness, the senses which are connected to the mind, they also light up. They also feel conscious. Right now when we see, it feels conscious. When I hear, it feels conscious. When I touch, it feels conscious. Smell, taste, it feels conscious. When the senses are lit up by consciousness, the body also feels conscious. This Upanishad says, nakagra, up to the tip of your nails, you feel, I am. How? This is borrowed from the sensory system. How? The sensory system borrows it from the mind. How? The mind borrows it from ego. How? The ego borrows it from the reflected consciousness in the ego. All this is said by one line. Tad ahankara tadatmya. Because of identification with ego. What is identified with the ego? Mind. What is identified with the mind? Senses. What is identified with the senses? Body. Tad ahankara tadatmya deha chetanata magat. Up to the body, consciousness pervades. Reflected consciousness. Now look at the verse. Chhaya ahankarayor aikyam. The identity of reflected consciousness and ego is like a red hot iron ball. There are two different entities, but they are mixed up in one. Reflected consciousness and ego. And then, from the ego to the rest of the mind, to the senses, down to the body, consciousness pervades. Reflected consciousness. It is borrowed. Ego borrows consciousness from the actual consciousness, and that borrowed consciousness is called reflected consciousness. Then the mind, rest of the mind, memory, intellect, they all borrow consciousness from the ego. And this mind lends consciousness to the senses. And the active senses make the body feel conscious. What is the limit of this borrowed consciousness? To the limit of your nervous system. Suppose there is a paralysis, a stroke, nervous system fails at one point. That part of the body will now not feel conscious anymore. Because it's unable to channelize the borrowed consciousness. So this is the explanation. Why you are feeling conscious right now, at this person. Why up to this only? Why not this feeling that you feel this is also part of me? Because your nervous system does not extend to that. This one doesn't feel like that. You are not identified with it. It's an object to you, but not identified with the mind and the senses. Now this arrangement is clear to all of us. Now in the 8th verse and 9th verse, he is going to use this arrangement for a forensic investigation in order to make it clear that from this reflected consciousness, from this ego, how do I go to my real self? From ego, how do I go to Atma? From ego, how do I go to Sakshi? From reflected consciousness, how do I go to pure consciousness? He will make it clear. Number 8. Ahankarasya tadatmyam Ahankarasya tadatmyam Chichaya deha sakshibhi Chichaya deha sakshibhi Sahajam karmajam bhranti Sahajam karmajam bhranti Janyam cha trividham kramat Janyam cha trividham kramat Ahankarasya tadatmyam Chitchaya deha sakshibhi Sahajam karmajam bhranti janyam trividham kramat. Okay. Now, he says, if we say all of this seems rather theoretical, it's not very clear to me, this pure consciousness. Up to what is clear to you? Up to ego. That much I can clearly identify. I am here, I can feel that. That's very clear. Body is very clear, senses are clear, mind, functioning of the mind, and in that mind, ego is there, that is also very clear. I. Okay. Now, he is going to show us, catch hold of this ego. Stay there, in the ego. Stay there, and from there he is going to show us the relationship of the ego with reflected consciousness, with this body, and with pure consciousness. From ego, how to go to pure consciousness? What is the relationship of the ego with this body? And what is the relationship of the ego with reflected consciousness? 3 questions he will answer. For what purpose? In order to take us from what we clearly know to what Vedanta wants to show us. That you are not this ego, you are the witness of the ego, you are Sakshi. Ahankara relationship with Chit Chaya, Chidabhasa. Ahankara relationship with Deha, body. Ahankara relationship with Sakshi, Atma, pure consciousness. Ahankara I understand, Sakshi not clear. Please show me what is the relationship. From Ahankara how can I go to Sakshi? How can I go? Show me. He says these 3 relationships are born of, he says, Sahajam Karmajam Bhranti Janyam. The relationship between ego and reflected consciousness is natural. It's Sahajam, natural. Whenever there is the ego, in fact, whenever there is mind, there will be reflected consciousness. Just like, imagine it's like the mirror. Mirror. So there is a mirror. In the mirror, I can see a reflected face, reflection of my face. In the morning when you look at your face in the mirror, the reflected face is in the mirror. Now I'm asking the question. The mirror is like the mind or ego, let us say. Mirror is like the ego. Reflected face is like reflected consciousness. Your real face, your original face, this face, it is like pure consciousness, Sakshi. So now I'm asking the question, what is the relationship between reflected face and mirror? Natural relationship. Whenever you get a mirror, your face will be reflected. Remove the mirror, no reflection. Mirror is there means face will be reflected. Mirror is not there means no reflection. So Sahajam, natural. With the mirror, reflection will come. With ego, consciousness will be reflected. Whenever ego appears, it will appear like a conscious ego. Right now, what it is appearing. Right now. In waking, in dream. When it does not appear, ego, no reflected consciousness will be there. Deep sleep. It is like removing the mirror. Then your face will not be reflected. Mind shuts down in deep sleep. So ego is not there. That's why you don't feel, I am sleeping. If you feel that I am sleeping, then you are not sleeping. You may be dreaming, but you are not sleeping. Sleeping is deep sleep. So in deep sleep, when the mind shuts down, the ego function also shuts down. And therefore you don't feel I am sleeping. In fact, feels like nothing, blank. And consciousness is also not reflected.